Hey there, readers and storytellers, and thank you for joining me on Story Unfolding, a show about changing the world through creativity, ingenuity, and intellectual discourse. We share meaningful conversations with creators, creatives, and dreamers who take it upon themselves to make a difference in the world. We have an influence on the world around us, regardless of our intent. The only way forward is by confronting the hard truths, asking the tough questions, and letting your voice be heard. We are better together each day with our human story unfolding. Now, I am pleased to have J.B. Hilliard on with me today. J.B. Hilliard was born of steel and fire and black wind. He was raised as a highlander in the foothills of a once great mountain chain on the confluence of the three mighty rivers that forged his realm's wealth and power for generations. His father, a peasant twerg, toiled away in industries of honest labor and instilled in him a work ethic that would shape his identity. His mother, a local healer, cared for his elders and his warrior uncle who helped to raise him during his formative years. His genius brother, whose wizardly prowess allowed him to master the art of the abacus and his own quill, trained with him for battles on fields of green and sheets of ice. Now, this introduction can keep going on. It's absolutely amazing, but I want to give my guest today the opportunity to introduce himself. J.B. Hilliard, thank you so much for joining me. And why don't you say hello to our audience?
Michael, thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show and meet your audience, your guests, and your followers. So thanks very much for the time.
Yeah, no problem. So for those of you who thought that intro was interesting, definitely go check out the full intro that was written by JB himself over on my blog. It's been up michaelkenreobooks.com/blog. So it's very creative, very refreshing. So I go through quite a few of these questionnaires and interviews and bios that authors write, and this was the first of its kind. So before we dive into anything else, I want to hear like what inspired you to write something like this. This is very cool.
Yeah, well, I thought that I looked at myself not as an author writing a fantasy adventure novel, but I looked at myself as a chronicler of deeds and the stories and the legends that I was creating within the Warminster series. And so I decided just to cast myself in my bio as a character within the chronicler of the adventures of Damus Alaric and Ritter of Vulcaneer and Adeline Elspeth, in the hopes that people would get a kick out of it. But also I think it just, I think it plays really well with the genre. So if you like fantasy or that kind of sword and sorcery stuff, I think the bio fits in pretty nicely with the folks that would pick up my book and read it.
Yeah, I want to know who your family is. You got a wizard, you got a healer, you got a
Twerg, like those are easy. Like my friends know who they are. So like for fire, steel, and black wind, I'm describing the city of Pittsburgh, and the mountain chain, which was the Appalachian Mountains, which is now still mountains, but it's not like the Rockies, and the three rivers, of course. And like many folks around here, my father worked in the mills. And so I created sort of like this laborer image of him by calling him a peasant twerg. And a twerg is a term I use for folks that just like dwarves in Tolkien work in the mines and forge steel and things like that. And my mother was a nurse, so fit into a healer. My brother has a master's degree in mathematics and is an international funds accountant. So for him, it was pretty easy figuring that one out. So but I had a fun time. I kind of hid my wife's profession. She used to play softball at a collegiate level, still does, and so she was a ranger of the diamond, and things like that. Just having a fun time with it, and just telling people who I was without showing it. But if you had a decoder ring, you could figure it out in a couple of minutes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did read that part about your wife, and I meant to bring that up because I'm an avid baseball player. I still play ball to this day. I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico right now, and we went to a professional game 2 nights ago. So yeah, it's a pretty important thing for me. So when I read that, I was like, oh man, I have to ask you.
Yeah, she played hot corner for a lot of years. She's a little older now, so she's moved to second, but long time at third base there. So, I kind of stuck it out. And of course, everybody in my genre knows what a ranger is, or at least they think they do.
Yeah.
If they like Aragorn or any of the Terry Brooks novels and things like that too. So I was just staying with the theme.
That's extremely creative and one of a kind. I haven't seen anything like it so far.
Thank you.
So before we jump in, I'm going to ask: are you a Steelers fan?
Of course, I'm a Steelers fan.
Okay.
You know how it works here in this city. It's children in this city are born with terrible towels as swaddling. Literally, they have pictures of hospitals where they'll have a bunch of kids and they'll just go down and they're all in not diapers but terrible towels. So I mean, from the day you're born here, it is ingrained into you. So yes, I am a Steelers fan.
And it follows you everywhere too. I've met Steelers fans when I went to college in Providence. I lived in New York City, and I went to this bar that was just a Steelers bar, and I could not even mention that I was from Texas. So,
well, we would automatically assume a Dallas Cowboys fan, which is, you can't do that. Even though I'm the way you're looking at it, you're kind of, I don't know, it means Houston Oilers maybe back in the day, or now the Texans, and that's okay.
I'm more of a baseball guy. So football, I don't know. Cowboys. I would say I would love the Cowboys if it weren't for Jerry Jones.
Yeah. So I think a lot of folks would say that they're like America's team, but you're right about I think not just the Steelers. The Steelers have a way of kind of being that that NFL royalty that people look at the Dallas Cowboys and they think New York Yankees, but when you say Pittsburgh Steelers, it means something to a lot of people. And you're right. You can go to any major city and find a Steelers bar somewhere, or you'll see, shots on Facebook or TikTok with someone with a terrible towel on Mount Everest or in a cockpit or in a spaceship somewhere. It's literally crazy how it just runs rampant here. So, and we're a little spoiled, we've got a lot of Super Bowls and a lot of playoff appearances. So, as a city, we're kind of spoiled, but I'm not going to complain. No complaints here.
It's not a bad place to be.
That's right.
Let's jump into some talk about your book. So as you can see, those watching on my YouTube channel right now, you can see JB's book behind me, The Last Keeper. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this project and if there's any others that you'd like to mention right now?
Yeah, sure. So this is book 1 of 4. The Warminster Saga starts out with The Last Keeper. That novel was launched back in December of 2021. The second in the series comes out here in August, so we're almost upon that. The third will come around the holidays, and the last one will come out, sometime end of Q1, early Q2 of 23. So it's getting pretty close, and the concept behind it is pretty simple. I got the ideas from playing Dungeons and Dragons for almost 20 years. I was both a player and a dungeon master. And big fan of the fantasy adventure or sword and sorcery kind of stuff. And so it's a bit of an epic fantasy that I've twisted alongside my love of the Gothic and anything dark. And so it's a bit of a dark fantasy too, and the main character, Damus Alaric, finds himself at odds nearly immediately with the villain, this Grey Taurus the Mad. And of course, Damus is a seer. He's a prophet of sorts. And so he sees the coming of this fallen keeper, a man who used to be part of his sect, coming back to take revenge in his onoramancy, in his dreams, kind of like modern day Edgar Casey would. I mean, he would sleep and have visions of the future. Damus has the same, but his visions are very dark, and he sees this and he doesn't understand, not only is this man coming for his sect, but why is he coming for him? And so it starts out a little bit with that. And and of course it's a sweeping adventure. I mean, it's an epic kind of, if you like the big battles, lots of magic. If you like dark fantasy, I think you'll find something in here for yourself.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones style. Is that kind of what you modeled off of?
Yeah, I think Lord of the Rings, I mean, Tolkien was the master, right? He was the granddaddy of them all. He created the genre. And so I think everybody beneath him has played to that in some capacity, whether it's, RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, where they've created something, or anybody like a Game of Thrones or Wheel of Time or the Aragon series back in the day. I mean, I think, we all pay homage to that in some level and respect, but you're right. I mean, so Game of Thrones is a little bit more NC-17 than you'd find my book. I would rate mine, more like a PG-13 leaning towards an R, but like I think an advanced young adult reader would like this. I don't think their parents might find anything with it, but by the same token, there's a lot of, you know, adult situations in there, including things like war and death, but you'll find, you know, things that are learning tools for them too, as part of the Last Keeper.
Okay. Now, in your story, is this so I'm assuming this is a different world, right, that you created. What inspired you to, other than obvious, you know, the books we've just talked about, but what inspired you to create this world, and, you know, give us a little bit more into that?
Yeah, so two things. I've created my own realm. It's the realm of Warminster, and it's named after one of my old Dungeons and Dragons characters. He was a wizard, and so I thought the name was something that was catchy and marketable, you know, from a business perspective. But I also think it really sort of sets the tone, and when you hear that, you can think of multiple different things. I think that was part of it, and so part of the book comes from a memorialization of 20 years of playing the game and or reading the genre, you know, understanding that, you know, to be successful in this business, you have to create interesting and unique monsters. So you'll find those scattered throughout my book. You have to create things like tension between the protagonist, and in this case, the villain in Grey Taurus. And you want people to understand too that these folks are they're human, right? There's no, you know, ultimate good or evil here. And so even though you might not like the bad guy, you will eventually find out why he's the bad guy, right? Or there are times when you're reading from the protagonist's point of view and you're disappointed in the choices they make because they're just human, right? Or at least you try to make them human, even though they might be a different race within the book. But, you know, I think that what I've tried to do really was create something that was new. And I also think, you know, it was a way for me, as I said, to kind of celebrate 20 years of playing a game that came up with some of those good ideas. And the one last thing I'd add to it is, you know, I think the main tension between the character of Damus, the main character, and Grey Taurus is this theory of onoromancy, this almost, you know, prophet-like ability to see the future when you dream. And that's based on a real life experience. And I'm no prophet, and I'm not a psychic, and I don't see the future. But when I was younger, around Damus's age in the books, I would say 17, 18, 19 years old, I started to have a series of recurring nightmares. And the man that appeared to me in my nightmares came to me and said, "Hey, I'm a guardian angel, and do what I tell you to do. And if you do, I'll reward you." And as stupid as that sounds now, when you're sleeping, that stuff is scary. And I just remember it, you know, I mean, to this day, some of the things he said to do, and challenges. And then when I didn't do them, he would fight me in my dreams. And I just turned that the true life experience, into something that not only I think scared me, but I think will scare other people. And I just put it on steroids in the book, right? So where this realm has magic, there where this stuff can exist, mine was just a real life experience that lasted over 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, my first couple of years of college and my last couple in high school. But it was something that scared me, and I hope that it'll scare some of the readers as well.
Oh, wow. That's really, that's interesting that you took that dream and then put it into, written words. I'm curious, did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, I've always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think it was possible. And I regret starting it as late as I did in life. I'm not old, but I'm older than people that would typically write in my genre, I think, or would read it. And there are folks out there that have been very successful in writing in the genre for 40 or 50 years in some cases. But I chose to get into politics. So my day job, I'm a lobbyist in DC, and I work with a lot of technology companies and defense companies and help them navigate the government marketplace. And I love doing that. I really, I think it's a lot of fun, but it also gave me another set of eyes, optics on things that I could turn into plots in my novel. So some of the inventions that come from the city of Abacus, or some of the weapons that are used, are things I saw that were being maybe developed in a lesser way, or in some cases a much greater way in our days worth of technology that I can put into a fantasy book and give the good guys an advantage from time and again. So I started writing when I was in fourth grade, and my uncle, who was paralyzed in the war, kind of I grew up in his bedroom. My mother was his nurse, as I said, and kind of hinted at it in my bio. And he could only do a very limited amount of things, right? As a quadriplegic, one of the things he can do was write, and so I kind of looked up to him. He was sort of a second father to me. And he talked me into submitting my fourth grade paper into an eighth grade writing contest, and I won. And then when my mother took me to to pick up my award, they all looked at me and were like, "You're not in eighth grade." But I won it anyway, and ever since then I've been kind of hooked. And so the other thing that we could do together was we played Dungeons and Dragons. It was a form of escapism for him. And we played it long after you would think some people kind of fade away when they get into high school and college, and we played long after that until he passed away. And so this is another way of me kind of learning a second career, getting to that point where I'd love to transition and do the writing full time, but the day job pays the bills right now. And I enjoy learning and seeing things. And you know what it is, that old saying where you write what and I see stuff develop, whether it's political intrigue in DC or new technologies or how countries work, and I've tried to work all of that into my novel to make it realistic.
That's awesome. That's actually a really great segue into the heart and soul of the intent of this channel, and that's talking about that deeper meaning and how our words are perceived by others. And that drives me to question, so you were writing fantasy, right? You were creating this whole new world that's apart from ours. You have, different creatures that you've already mentioned that are, unhuman, not human. Yet you integrated, what you knew into, your world development. So I'm curious, like, how do you see that line between fiction and reality blurring, or is it hard line? Is it blurred? How much of it seeped into your writing style in terms of like you constructing maybe governments or anything like that? Just talk us through some of that.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely blurred. I think if you were to read the novel, obviously it's based, kind of has a sort of like a medieval setting to it. So you're talking about kings and queens and emperors and rulers that are different than what we have. But I created a capital city of Warminster known as Castleshire, which is kind of like a UN, where all of these countries send their legates and ambassadors to come and negotiate so that they can stop wars or things that they try to do for the betterment of the realm. And in my day job, that's the United Nations, or it's some of these other groups of countries that have gotten together to do things to help second and third world countries. Or you see in a lot of my stuff, fantasy. What irks me about fantasy, and this is just my own personal opinion, is that if you take a look at Lord of the Rings, there are thousands of years that have gone by in Lord of the Rings, and yet they're still using swords and shields. Or Game of Thrones, like Jon Snow, the main character in all of Game of Thrones, is the 999th, whatever it was, the knight on the wall, and he's still using a sword and a shield. So you're talking about 3,000 years, and there's no advancement. So I created a city called Abacus within my realm, which is a scholar city, which is free thinking. And it invites people in regardless of what they're trying to do to share knowledge with one another. And in some ways, there's a lot of invention that comes out of that. And so to take care of this sort of like sci-fi nut in me, I've got my, my Q characters, to use a James Bond term, where they create, technology that just so happens to fall into the hands of the good guys at the right moment where they can use it, for things. And so some of that is, I don't violate the idea that this is a medieval society. So a lot of the stuff you'll find are things that could have been found in medieval inventions, and were, in some instances, Bronze Age, Renaissance periods. things like that, but you just don't read about them a lot in fantasy. So eventually you'll see these devices, whether they're, crazy devices. I have my version of a tractor beam was this thing called the Fisher's hook, and the pirate ship is chasing the good guys, and they shoot out this long cable that has a hook in it, almost like a talon, and breaks through the bones of the boat and starts to reel them back in. And that's my way of getting a tractor beam that you would find in a Star Wars movie or a Star Trek movie. It's like, so, and I see that in DC with the Pentagon. We have all of these developing technologies, and or the CDC with developing stuff that that fights diseases, or energy. They're developing new energy technologies. Where part of Abacus, they use water to power part of the city. They have clocks and stuff like that. So I've always found that to be interesting, and I wanted to bleed into my fantasy a little bit of sci-fi, but not enough to turn off my fantasy fans. Just enough for them to maybe get their fix of sci-fi too.
Yeah, gotcha. That's cool. I know you did. So you also mentioned a sense of escapism with Dungeons and Dragons, and I know later in our written portion of the interview you talk about that as well. And I feel like fantasy kind of feeds that need for escapism, kind of escaping from reality. Yet you drew a lot of realistic components into it. So were you intending to create a world that people could escape from, or was there a deeper meaning that you were trying to inform as well on our reality?
Well, sure. I think it's a bit of both, right? I mean, I think let's face it, when I write, it's all fun. It can be frustrating, but it's my form of escapism. I get to turn off the switch. I don't have to be a professional. This is something that I'm doing that I would do if I never sold a single book. It would just be something that I love, and I'm creating stories, and people that read them, I hope they like them, right? But the other side of it is as somebody who's been around and has seen different things within our cultures, and in other cultures, you find the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And I try to embed lessons as part of that. For example, one of the main characters is a guy named Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer, and Sir Ritter suffers from two things. He's a peasant knight. His family was given this title, and so he has all of these great responsibilities to defend this border, but no one takes him seriously because he doesn't have wealth. His family was basically given this from a good deed that his grandfather did, but it's the worst job in the kingdom. Go fight these Trollborn that are coming from the Dragon Breath Mountains and stop them from getting to us, right? So he's sort of like the shield for everybody, and it's his embrace of the duty and how important that is, and how he doesn't look at himself as a peasant knight, but he also doesn't identify himself as part of this noble structure, even though he's on the very first rung, the lowest rung of it. And then secondly, he's a half-breed. He's kind of like a muggle, to use a Harry Potter term. He's part human and part raven elf. And I designed the world where there's some folks cast aspersions on those that are called Trollborn, meaning they're not of singular blood. And it's a way, I think, that people can learn the lesson about how you could be a hybrid person, someone that is of mixed blood, still fit in Ritter's case, be one of the most valorous people in the realm, and become a hero. And I think that reaches not just maybe the young adult audience that might be starting to read this book, but I think anybody from 8 to 80 that would pick that up. I think that's a lesson we can't learn enough. So I like to talk to things like that, as well as challenge some political norms and things like that in the book. I don't want to be too many spoiler alerts and such, but I think if you read the books, you'll follow along my meaning.
So what would you want your readers to take away from your books?
So first and foremost, I want them to be entertained, right? Like if I'm picking up a fantasy book, I'm not doing it because I have any other delusion. I literally want to pick it up to read it and like it, right? I want to escape into that. And so for me, the first thing is, are you entertained by my book? Do you like it? Do you like the story? Do you like the characters? And I'm always open. I always try to respond to people that hit my website and send me an email or hit me on my social channels. I always try to respond to them, good, bad, and ugly. I love their reviews. I take constructive criticism from it, but I want them to be entertained. And if they liked it, great. And if they cared enough to reach out to me, good, bad, or ugly, I motivated them in some capacity to do that, so I think that part's good. But then also, I think some themes, some important themes, run through this that we can all identify with, right? Like I mentioned duty before for Ritter. Ritter not only has a duty to the kingdom, one that he didn't ask for, but one that he embraces, but also he starts to fall in love with a princess who is in a higher caste of elves, someone that he knows that he's not allowed to be with. So there's this sort of tryst of, forbidden love where she falls for him and he falls for her, and she can't reach down for him because it's not within the rules and the canon of her society. And the same thing goes for him. He knows that if he does reach for her, he's doing something he shouldn't do. And so the answer is do they, do they heed the warnings of society, or do they break them, right? Do they challenge them? And same thing goes, I think, with the Trollborn stuff I mentioned earlier. Just little things that I challenge. In fact, there are just as many queens as there are kings in my realm. I try to challenge, and the gender stereotypes. In fact, I think I'm excited to see what happens and what kind of response I get from a scenario that I haven't seen anywhere else. I can't talk about it. It's coming in book 2, but we'll also, I think people will ask questions about it, because I think it's a pretty cool concept. At least I hope so. I'm hoping that people can take away from this and think about it, use it in their real world experience, but walk away saying, "Wow, that was a really good story. I liked it. When's the next one?" Right?
Oh,
That's
that's
what I
awesome.
hope, at least. Yeah.
Well, that got me intrigued. So if you need an advanced reader for book 2, let me know, and then I'll have you back on.
You are on, my friend. You are absolutely on.
Yeah, I definitely want to see what this concept is, and then we could talk about it in a future interview.
Sure.
But yeah, that's really encouraging. I think something I wanted, another quick question before we end this is, so we already talked about what you want, the readers to get from it, but is there anything that you would like to ask our audience to do? What could you, so you talk about a whole bunch of different things so far in our interview, and you talked about how, fantasy can give you that escape, yet it can also inform you and kind of give you that sense of, ability to look back on yourself, right? Look back on the world around us. Is there anything that you would ask our audience to do to inspire change around the world?
Yeah, so a couple of things, actually. I mean, but not to be too greedy about it. I mean, I think that if we all, there's that, like pay it forward kind of philosophy that's there, and do something kind for someone you don't know every single day, and you'll feel good about it. I mean, whether it's giving change to the guy on the corner, or in my case, I have a couple of charities that I've been involved in. I get a lot involved with veterans. Obviously, the story about my uncle really started me down that path early, but every man in my family up to me served in one form of the military, many of whom came back changed people, whether it was my uncle, who was paralyzed at combat, or it was other folks that saw things that they can't unsee. And everybody, I think, needs to to kind of reach out and help folks in that community. So I focus on that, but I think if you just take away my charge in helping veterans, and drop that onto somebody and just do some kind thing for someone every day, I think that's really what kind of will make you feel good. You'd be surprised how much just some spare change means to somebody, or spending some time volunteering somewhere. And it really doesn't even matter what the volunteerism is for, as long as you feel good about it and you're helping people do it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think for me, it's awareness. Awareness is a huge aspect. And I know in a lot of things that I do, I preach education. I think us just being immersed with other people and other cultures is a great way to, make a difference. And I think writing in itself is just a very, what's the word I'm thinking? It's a great way to influence change. And I think I applaud you for coming out and putting out this story and putting yourself out to the public. I think that's a very courageous thing to do. So you did say this is book 1 of 4, correct?
That is
book 2 is coming out when?
August of 2022. It's going to be called Voradin's Lair. And book 3 will come out around the holidays this year too. It's the Trillius Gambit. Okay. Book 4 comes out next end of winter, beginning of spring, and that'll be the final in the series, called Echoes of Ghostwood.
Okay.
So
Now,
the
so
big
you
epic
did
finale,
mention,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you did mention that you're a new writer. So would you have any advice to any aspiring writers out there?
Yeah, a lot actually. Number one, keep writing. Like even if you can't do more than a page or even a paragraph, the act of writing becomes muscle memory. It's just like working out, right? If you don't work out on a day, you start to feel like you're a bum. Like
Yeah.
I need to be at the gym, or I need to do something. Let me walk the dogs. And the same thing goes with writing. I think it becomes something. And even if you sit down and just plan the next book or plan the next chapter, whatever you're going to do, sit down and make it something that's habitual. I think that's how I look at it. Secondly, be open to constructive criticism, because as much as the first time I shared my book with someone, I was scared. You don't know what they're going to think about. And then when they come back with really not, over the top stuff, but constructive criticism that's helpful, and you can get beyond that, that excitement and anxiousness about it, you realize that usually they're right. You might be too close to something sometimes, or too committed to something, and their suggestions might improve the book before it's printed or the next one. And so, I think I would leave any aspiring or current writers with those two, nuggets. I mean, write every day and be open to constructive criticism, and actually ask for it. Do like you said. I find alpha and beta readers, get yourself in front of them, and ask them to tear it up, let you know what they think. And you don't have to agree with them, but you should listen to them, because if they're reading your stuff, that's who your target market is. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's great advice. And I'm a pretty new author as well. My debut novel came out December 31st of this past year. So I had a similar experience when I first got it out to the public, got it out to other people other than my wife. My editor, her first response, there were complete contrasts. And my editor's response was, "Are you sure you want to write fiction?" Now, there's a whole backstory to it, that she said that my writing made her think of Chekhov, and she thought I wanted to write, a political discourse. So, but when I got that email saying, "Are you sure you want to write fiction?" I'm like, what? Oh my gosh. And then on the commerce side, I got from my beta reader a review saying that she likened me to Dan Brown. And I'm like, what? Like that is so far on opposite ends of the spectrum that you just, you have to go with the, goods and bads.
yeah, you literally, I mean, and you find a good piece of, like, I'll tell you what, I got a 2-star review one time, and the reviewer said, "I grabbed this book because of the cover. I wanted to read it so bad. I wanted it to be good, but I just couldn't get past 50 pages. It was just too dense for me. Sorry, 2 stars." And what I took from it was, hey, the cover did its job. I sold the book.
Exactly.
And like there's that, it's like you got to look for those little nuggets in there, and you're like, all right, I heard her, and maybe I can be less dense when I write. And I find out that, maybe I can be, and that just comes with practice.
Be a little less like Tolkien. I never finished The Fellowship. So
well, that's the thing, it's like when you think epic fantasy, you think of these sweeping stories of historical nature, and unfortunately I fall into that. But I listen to folks like that because that was a big piece of constructive criticism. And I'm not Tolkien. I'm never going to be Tolkien. So my job is to be JV Hilliard and write something that people are going to like and buy and watch, when they're, or listen to on their audio, I should say. And that's just lessons learned. And those are the kind of things that just, as small as that was, it was literally like a 3-second line, and it's like, I got it. So my illustrator did a good job, but I'm too dense.
Yep. Awesome. Now we are running short on time, so I want to give you the opportunity. Where can we find you?
Sure. So thanks for that opportunity too. JV Hilliard, JVHILLIARD.com. Will take you to my website, and then of course on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, at JV Hilliard Books, or if you like Facebook, JV Hilliard, and you'll find me there.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. And all those links will be located down below. And if you like this interview, definitely click subscribe and go listen to some other amazing authors and creators that we have on this channel. Definitely go check out The Last Keeper and look out for book 2 coming out soon. And JV, thank you so much for coming today, and I hope to have you again.
It's my pleasure, and I'll send you a copy of the second one so you can tell me what you think about it. And you'll know exactly where I'm going when you read it. So
awesome. And all of you out there, read more, and write mindfully.